All right, hello and welcome to the semifinals of our horror game brackets. It's the same trio as always. We are back debating which game we believe is our favorite horror game. So again, not the best horror game, but what we think is the best out of the three of us, out of our opinions.
Hey, Mike, not to derail it too
yes.
early on, but can we have Sonic Unleashed added?
Oh my God! Oh yeah, werehogs. Number one scariest thing in the world right there.
That one's
Sorry.
the overtime for the grand champion.
Sorry, we actually have legit games. Not as legit as Sonic Unleashed, but we do have legit games to talk about.
It is true. We have Bloodborne facing off against Resident Evil 7. Two very distinct horror games. One is much more action-oriented in terms of a lot of combat and intense, difficult gameplay, and that being Bloodborne. And the other one, Resident Evil 7, is a lot more low action, at least until you get to some of the boss fights, and more about atmosphere, right? And what's going on in the environment as opposed to the enemies themselves. And so there's actually a lot of debate points, I think, in environment versus character design and what makes a horror game a horror game. We've actually started talking about it a little bit before the video, and so we've kind of already preempted this debate before we started recording, and so we already kind of have a couple points we want to mention if anyone would like to start out.
Do you want me to, Travis, or do you want to?
Whichever, you know.
All right, fine. I'll take the reins.
There you go.
One of the big things is that we keep mentioning when we mention horror games is fear and how it really is delivering on this fear, really. How it's conveying it through the game messages. Obviously, Resident Evil 7 does it a very different way than Bloodborne does, because Bloodborne gives you a more active way to, I guess, control it. And one of the big ways that you can kind of classify fear is with a lack of control, which is one of the first points that I want to bring up. Travis, do you really think that Resident Evil 7 gives you that kind of state of helplessness that is necessary to go forward in calling this one of the better horror games?
I feel like it gives you more of a helplessness than Bloodborne does because of all of the limited like ammunition and stuff that it gives you. Because though I obviously am admitting Bloodborne is a very difficult game, and you have to be very precise in everything you're doing, but like your dude's a glass cannon. You can like combo people, at least, you know, the non-bosses, to instant death, whereas, you know, if you make a boo-boo, they'll kill you just as easily. But like, when I was playing Bloodborne for the little bit I did, I think I played and almost beat the first boss, and then I couldn't quite do it and got pissed off, so I quit. So maybe like a demo portion of it, but like, I personally don't get too scared off of just the appearance alone, because like, I'm a wound care nurse. I see gross shit on the regular, so it doesn't scare me or anything just to see this big creepy monster spewing out whatever it is spewing out. I have to feel like I have to like be very conservative in what I'm doing in order to feel fear, versus just being able to like see what this big scary monster is. So that's why I feel like Resident Evil 7 for me resonates better as a horror game, because it gives me, you know, that same gross crap, that, you know, that atmosphere of, ew, this is icky, but then it also gives me that added fear of like wanting to conserve my ammo, having to like take things really, really slow, and then also just having like the story behind it. It also kind of gives me a little more motivation to keep moving forward, whereas Bloodborne, it's, you know, slay everything. and those be my points that I'll make right now, and if someone else wants to take the wheel.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the things, too, that we didn't mention, as far as helplessness goes, because I know that's what Nick was originally talking about, the main antagonist of Resident Evil 7, Jack Baker, at the beginning of the game, lights himself on fire and then shoots himself inside of his mouth through his brain and survives. And so that idea of helplessness, when he's chasing you through the halls, you already know you could shoot him a million times and he's not going to go down, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I wasn't going to point it out yet, but I mean, I feel like the kind of conservative on ammo, yeah, that's in every Resident Evil. Well, I guess not every Resident Evil. I don't really think you'd have to conserve it as much in like Resident Evil 5, but I'm saying that it does... I guess this is my whole issue when it comes down to Resident Evil. Yes, conservative ammo. At Resident Evil 7, it hasn't been new at this point. You should all know, like, at this point you're almost conditioned to the fact that yes, I have to conserve ammo. But in your case, Mike, yes, you don't even like you already know that like shooting him won't do a thing. But I mean, I feel like that level of that lack of control that you have, I feel like in Bloodborne it's more because it gives you, the way that I kind of see it is it gives you a deeper sense or like a deeper feeling than just what just like some kind of pop-up scares would give, because yes, you have the kind of tormented mind of all of these people around you, like again these town folk that are just disgusting looking, and it doesn't matter that Travis is desensitized to it, but I feel like a common way to just get a quick reaction out of you is that kind of jump scare moment, but you're not getting a deeper level of it where it's just like as you're walking around, you should feel scared. You should feel like, ugh, this is disgusting walking around these people. I don't think that it's just enough to say that being conservative with your ammo gives you enough of a scared emotion, because you already know you're supposed to be doing that, especially if you're jumping in on Resident Evil and Resident Evil 7.
Yeah, and you're right. And I'm not trying to, because my point was not conservative ammo there.
Yeah.
My point was, shooting this guy won't do anything, so you don't even bother shooting. So my point was, the helplessness is knowing there's nothing you can do to stop this guy. I guess when you talk about lack of control, they both have lack of control in different ways. And it also goes back, one of the things you said, Nick, that I loved that we've been using as a base is the whole fear of the unknown concept.
Yeah.
As far as, the biggest fear is not knowing what's coming. Both games do that excellently in different ways. Bloodborne does it in the sense that you have this giant, absurd-looking monster. How are you supposed to know how to fight this thing? You don't know what the best technique is. It looks like something that wouldn't even really get hurt. You're faced with a creature that you have no idea what it's capable of. There's the fear of the unknown, not in that you don't know what's coming, but you don't know what this thing is capable of. Resident Evil 7, on the other hand, has the fear of the unknown in that you don't know what's invincible and what isn't at first. You don't know what can cause extreme damage versus what can cause no damage, and you have no idea, similar to Bloodborne, what to do. Right? A new enemy approaches you, and you don't know how to handle the situation yet. There's a lot of trial and error in that. Jack Baker comes at you. At first, you shoot him thinking I can take him down until you realize you can't. But then the mole did come, and you start to wonder, well, can I kill these things? It's a lot of trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. So both games have that. Bloodborne just doesn't, in that you can kill it, but you don't know what it's going to do to you.
The way
in Resident Evil, you don't know what you can kill.
Yes, I agree with you. The way that I kind of see it is that they both give I'm just keep trying to bring it into like more biological emotions that you're feeling, and one of the biggest one is that fight or flight response that you'll have when you're approaching one of these people. And so and the thing is, both of them are kind of catered towards a different audience. I mean, Bloodborne is more, I want to fight this person. I want to actually like. The fear is causing a different kind of reaction out of you, I guess, and it is part of the way that the game is structured. So in Bloodborne, it is the fight response where you can run away, but these monsters are going to keep chasing you and chasing you. I mean, it comes down to like if you remember like the early Dark Souls games, like Miyazaki had a really cruel way that like if you had a rat come by, like you can try to run away from these people, but they're just going to keep following you. I know it's something in Resident Evil 2 like that, but you get bit by a rat, you're just going to die over time. Like, you can't just keep running in Bloodborne. And in Resident Evil, it kind of structures it to, because of the way that the game's structured, and because your weapon is limited, it kind of wants you to run. And in my personal opinion, in Resident Evil, it does give you a deeper understanding with the story and the lore of the game, but just running, I feel like, doesn't really make the horror game, I guess. And the reason why I'm kind of leaning towards Bloodborne is because both of them have the atmosphere, both of them have the fear, both of them have the fear of the unknown for sure. It's like, but one of them gives you a deeper way to engage in that fear and to overcome it, and the other one just lets you run.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think Resident Evil 7 is a lot less running than you make it sound like it is. I've played games like Call of Duty and, ironically, Wolfenstein with Matt, where we literally do just run away from everything till we hit that next checkpoint. The thing is, in Resident Evil, it makes you want to run. I agree with that. It definitely elicits that flight response. You don't have a lot of ammo. You want to run, but you can't always do that. There are parts of the game where you have to find a certain key. And even though you want to run away, you know it's in the room filled with zombies. So you want to run, and you want to just try to avoid everything, but sometimes you can't. There are certain segments of the game where enemies are holding items you need, and you actually have to take down those enemies. And so I think what's fun about Resident Evil is it elicits the flight response, but it still forces you in some ways to fight. You don't always have to fight. There are a lot of zombies you can ignore and enemies you can ignore. In a way, Bloodborne is similar in that vein too. There's a lot of segments where enemies are shooting at you and people just say, screw it, I'm just going to sprint past everything and not even deal with it. I think that fight response you're talking about is not exclusive, but mostly exclusive to boss fights. Because boss fights you can't run from. But there's a lot of times where you're faced with a bunch of enemies and people are just like, screw it, I'm going to run away from all these. So
yeah, I guess you're right.
Both games kind of have that. I think they're different in that Bloodborne, your first instinct is to fight. In Resident Evil, your first instinct is to run. But in both, you almost end up doing the opposite in certain situations. So they're kind of opposite in how they deliver their fear, I guess.
Which, yeah, that's true. Travis, sorry, I kind of derailed from that one point that we had. Did you have anything else that you wanted to point out about Resident Evil 7 then?
I'm trying to think. I don't think so on the top of my head, at least for now.
Well, I think the biggest thing I would like to mention then, and you can probably talk a lot about this, is one thing that I feel like Bloodborne wins by a landslide in is the boss fights.
Yeah.
Talking not even from the horror standpoint, I love Resident Evil games. If you watched our last bracket video, Nick made a point about Fire Emblem Awakening, that it was kind of disappointing to him in a lot of different ways for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
In the way he feels about that is kind of how I feel about Resident Evil 7 a little bit, is I love the game, but the boss fights in Resident Evil have always been so fun because they're tense and you don't always know what to do and it doesn't feel like you're making progress. I feel like in Resident Evil 7, a lot of the boss fights felt a little bit tedious to me.
Yeah.
It just felt like they were bullet sponges. They were never really hard. It just felt like you're shooting, run away, shoot, run, shoot, and it's just kind of a repeat of that. And I feel like they weren't fun. They weren't engaging the way that Bloodborne's bosses were engaging.
And Bloodborne, I guess, is more punishing in that regard, too, because, again, From Software has that reputation of, if you're going to get hit, you're going to get hard. In the same vein, when I'm just saying most players, not people who are veterans of the series, but to say a newcomer comes into Dark Souls 3 and you're facing that tutorial boss in that night,
You're going to die.
Yeah.
It probably took me like 35 minutes, something like that, to beat that boss, and that's just the beginning.
Yep.
And it just gets more complicated from there. But the way that I kind of see it is, and I guess this is one of the other things that I want to talk about, and something we actually haven't talked about yet. Well, actually, first I want to address the point that Mike made about Fire Emblem Awakening. I can kind of understand that, where people hold the game up, at least this is kind of how I'm relating it, people hold the game up to a pretty high regard, and I like the fact that they do that. The issue with it is that because that you have knowledge of the previous games in the series, you know what that reputation, or I guess your expectation is a better way to say it, is different. So after, like, if you played the original Resident Evil, or like the original trilogy in 4, going into 7, you have a different expectation than when you just played like 5, 6, and 7. You're like, all right, so this is what the original series is like. And so I'm thinking that I'm just gonna have it out there as like a point. Maybe you could take it with a grain of salt, because you can compare Resident Evil 7 to Resident Evil 1 and 2. It could be harder, or you could be more critical of that, because in terms of like common consensus, Resident Evil 2 has the higher rating and is known as the better game. But anyway, so going back to the other thing, I want to talk about phobias a little bit. And this was a point that I always thought was kind of weird when you're when you think about it, is because you hear about a lot of like the fear of heights, the fear of spiders, like arachnophobia. And I'm wondering, is there certain games that kind of do a good job of using that to their advantage? Because one of the things, at least for me, I'm not a huge fan of dismembered bodies, I guess. I don't know if this probably isn't the best way to say it either, but I'm not a fan of things that look too morphed, I guess. Like if a person has like even as a kid, I didn't even like the way Machamp looked in Pokemon because he had 4 arms. I was like, this kind of looks creepy to me. And I'm wondering, like, is there a certain way that Resident Evil or Bloodborne really can address these kind of common fears and use them to their advantage? Because in certain games, I've seen that. In certain games where it's just like you're battling at the top of a mountain, a guy trucking down boulders at you, and it does a good job of trying to get you to overcome your phobia in that case. And I'm curious, is there any game that either one of these games that can do that?
So
they both do. Oh, you go, Travis.
Oh, yeah. So I would say that Bloodborne probably does a better job just because of the huge variety of like villains there are, the scary things to kill, because I can't think of a single boss that like remotely related to any of the other bosses in that game. Whereas Resident Evil 7, it had like that, the wife kind of turned into that weird spider
That did terrify me.
esque thing, and that probably was the creepiest boss fight, honestly. But like what Mike was saying, it wasn't that difficult to beat her. You basically just pulled out your shotgun, and then if you just hit her right in the middle, one of the like part of the spray would hit that critical point, and then you just kind of pulled out your like strong pistol and just kind of shot her, whatever you want to call it. It's not like an eyeball, but it was just like that goo ball that all of the bosses had.
Oh, you go.
Sorry.
Unless you're done.
I think I'm done.
Because I was going to say, everything Travis says is completely true. But I will say there's a flip side to everything that we're saying here. If we're talking strictly enemies, then everything we're saying is true. But in my opinion, environment, I would give to Resident Evil 7 in terms of the amount of interactivity that you have with the world around you. Bloodborne,
I could see that.
As big as Bloodborne is, I feel like there's a lack of actually interacting with things around you. You know, there's not a lot of entering buildings, and there's really no NPCs to talk to, minus a couple. And granted, there's not a lot in Resident Evil 7 either, but there's a lot more interacting in Resident Evil in terms of trying to search for lost items, places, and trying to find your way through a world. And the mansion constantly changes is the thing. The main enemy, Jack Baker, will literally smash a hole through the wall in the mansion, permanently changing what it looks like, and that doesn't always happen. Right? So it's not like that's something that's programmed in to happen to every person that plays the game. It's random. Sometimes he might punch through a certain wall. Sometimes he might not. It just depends. And so your mansion layout could almost look a little different. And it's not a major thing. It's only like slight alterations. But it still says a lot about the game. You unlock a certain pathway, and you realize it's just a shortcut leading back to somewhere else. And then different enemies might spawn in locations. What was once a safe room might not be a safe room. Your environment around you is constantly changing and adapting. There's not a lot of that in Bloodborne. Bloodborne is pretty static in terms of the environment you're in. And so in that regard, I think Resident Evil 7 does win. I think there's more of a fear of an environment that's constantly changing around you, and you don't always know what to expect. There's a lot less predictability in Resident Evil 7 in terms of that. So the enemies, Bloodborne wins by a mile. But I think the complexity of the mansion setting in Resident Evil 7 has the environment of Bloodborne beat. Bloodborne is a much more expansive world, but at the cost of a world that's fun and easy to interact with, I guess. Resident Evil 7 is smaller, but there's a lot more to do with that world.
So we're about that time then, if we want to start the voting.
Yeah, sure. You guys should probably go first.
Okay. Travis, go.
Oh, dear God. I'm probably going to give my vote to Resident Evil 7 just on the bias of I don't feel scared when I'm playing Bloodborne. It's a good game, but to me it's not like a horror game just because I'm very desensitized to gore and creepy little things, so I need to have a little extra thing there to get me in the mood of scare. And, fear is a big portion of a good horror game.
Yeah.
I would say so. I'm going to make Mike the tiebreaker then. Bloodborne, I think that the acclamation that Travis has to gore really can set a different impression that you could have when even seeing or playing the game. To most people, I would argue that Bloodborne does give that feeling.
Which is fair,
I think I do think it is a specific case for Travis, but I do think just based on acclamations and based on enemies alone, I have a feeling that at least just in my mind, I do feel that Bloodborne will be able to give a deeper fear than Resident Evil 7. At least it scared me more, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right, so to kind of break the tie a little bit, where my head's at is Bloodborne's fantastic. It's a very expansive world. It's a lot of creative enemies and creative design, and the combat in it's really fun. I'm extremely biased toward Resident Evil games, as I'm sure everyone's aware. It's hard for me to kind of say that a Resident Evil game is not good. The issue that I have with Resident Evil 7 is it's fantastic at what its goal was, which was to revive the Resident Evil franchise. And in that regard, it completely did its job and deserves all the praise in the world. But compared to the original trilogy, I don't think it does the job of spreading fear and the puzzles interactivity as well as the original games did. It was a huge step in the right direction. And I think this game single-handedly saved the Resident Evil franchise. But if I was going to compare it to other Resident Evil games, it would still be maybe number 3 or 4, maybe even 5 on my list.
Damn, that is almost the exact way that I think of Awakening.
Right. And so I guess that's the issue that I'm having, right? It's the same one that you had when that one came around is I love the franchise and I love the game, but it doesn't speak to me the other ones did. And I appreciate what it accomplished, but it didn't nail things for me. The boss fights especially, they weren't fun. I didn't enjoy doing them. Usually Resident Evil boss fights are scary. You have this big enemy that's coming at you. These ones weren't scary. They were just annoying to me. So as much as I love the environment and I love what this game did for Resident Evil, I gotta vote for Bloodborne. So
really?
That's my vote.
2-1 win.
Yeah. So Bloodborne will be the first game that ends up into our championship. Resident Evil 7 is getting knocked out the window here. Our second matchup of the day, and we're going to jump right into this to make sure we have a good time, is Resident Evil 2 versus Amnesia. This one's a little bit of a closer matchup in terms of just general critics and their scores and everything. Resident Evil 2, everything I said about Resident Evil 7, just amplify it for Resident Evil 2. I think this game did such a phenomenal job at nailing everything that it was trying to do in terms of being scary, being action-packed, and having a well-endowed environment that's fun to interact with. Amnesia, on the other hand, is fantastic in eliciting fear in a very complicated and mysterious world, right? You don't understand a lot of what's going on.
Nope.
And I think that's what makes it scary, is there's no recollection of what's happening, but things are coming at you and they're scaring you. And so they both are fun in very different ways, and they both have very different ideas of storytelling. So, who wants to start?
I'm just going to ask a general question to you guys, because this is one of the things that I realized I didn't even mention the first round matchups. Obviously, we had less time, but one of the big points that I was going to bring out about fear is just conditioning in the way of once you see it once, you're not going to be as scared the second time you see it. Which game, at least, do you feel like one of these games is a better way of giving more variety in the ways that it's going to surprise you?
So with Amnesia, what's interesting is like I have the Steam thing. So there's so many mods of Amnesia that you can basically continue to play forever and just keep doing different mods of it where it would change the story and like the different puzzles that you have to do. So it would constantly be a refreshing thing. And then I'm not far enough in Resident Evil 2 to know whether or not things start to feel repetitive. If it's like, oh, this is another zombie-filled hallway, let me figure out a way to get around them and get whatever object is in the other end of this hallway. Because right now I'm still scared, so.
Yeah, I will say to that point, and I kind of mentioned it with Mr. X in the last round, where once you start to get used to the hallways in Resident Evil 2, where you're like, oh, that hallway's just going to have a bunch of zombies in it. You have this guy that's twice as big as zombies in a trench coat charging at you, who's completely unkillable, and you're like, well, this hallway looks different than it used to look. So Resident Evil 2 has a pretty good morphing world where you expect to see something, and you expect a room to just be zombies or whatever, and then you realize as you get further in the game that, hey, I've been in this hallway before. It's nothing like what it used to be. So I think that's the point with Resident Evil 2 that I would start off by making, is that it does a great job of fear in terms of not always knowing what's going to come, and I don't think it gets repetitive as it goes on. I don't know much about Amnesia in that regard. I don't know if enemies change as it goes on. I mean, I guess, Travis, do you feel as you get further in Amnesia, does the type of jump scares change, or is the type of jump scare that happens in the first hour the same as in, like, the 6th or 7th hour?
The jump scares do change a little bit, because the creatures do kind of switch. Like, they change throughout the game by, like, little increments at a time. And then, like, it also, like, say you go back to this one area that was very well lit before, it can very well be very dark later. And then, like I was saying in the previous round, they have a thing where you kind of lose your sanity in darkness, and then it also comes down to the whole, like, you hold up your lantern, so now you are a beacon for these monsters, whereas your lantern might not reach where the other monsters are. So then they know exactly where you are. You don't know if they're even there until maybe it's too late. So, yeah, I mean, the jump scares, it's kind of the same, but the environment you're in is constantly changing. And then, like, as you're trying to solve puzzles, it also kind of adds that stress of, like, I need to do this one thing, so I need to figure out how to get around the one monster in order to be able to achieve this goal. And then also trying to just figure out what the goal is, because sometimes it's very convoluted.
Let me kind of backtrack on the question then, because I feel like I didn't take it in the direction that I wanted it to. When I was talking about, like, just conditioning in general, every game has like a gameplay loop, and, like, again, in Fire Emblem, it's like going on the maps, you destroy enemies, you level up your characters so you can fight better ones, get better sword arts, whatever. I guess I wasn't really concerned as much in, like, the gameplay loop of that. I just want to be sure that, do these games still make you feel fresh, that if you're being scared, again, like Mike said, at the 1 hour mark, and you're being scared like 10 hours later on, like, do you still feel that like the same kind of genuine shock that you did in the beginning? Because if a game is still being able to switch up the ways that it's trying to scare you, and switch up the more interactive elements, which I guess we did touch on, I just want to be sure that you're not being scared with the same jump scare in 30 minutes and 5 hours. That's what I want to be sure of if the game is like that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, and this is why I lean heavily in this one towards Resident Evil 2, at least at the moment, is both games do that. I think Resident Evil 2 does it in a much more satisfying way, in that I feel like, and I could be wrong about Amnesia, but I feel like it does that by just making the world a little bit darker next time, or adding maybe one extra enemy this time, right? Kind of like how I don't like when games make themselves more difficult by just adding a couple more enemies, right? I think it's a cheap way to do it.
Oh, yeah.
In that same vein, I think it's cheap to make a game scarier by just saying, all right, let's just, instead of one guy chasing you, let's have two guys chasing you now.
Yeah.
You know? Resident Evil 2's fear comes from, in the second half of the game, and this is Claire's story, so it's not a spoiler for Travis, thankfully. There's a girl that you start to protect, right? So in the beginning of the game, you're just running for your sanity, right? But towards the end of the game, this weird, corrupt police chief steals her away and is hiding her inside his house. And all of a sudden, you're trying to avoid zombies that are not just trying to eat you, but that are potentially going to go after this girl, this daughter. And you don't know if she's going to be safe or not. So your fear all of a sudden is not, I don't want to get eaten, but your fear is, I don't know if this girl's alive anymore. I might be doing all this, and this girl could be eaten. She could be a zombie now. Your fear is a lot more narrative-driven in Resident Evil 2. There's a real fear of, these characters that I have a real connection to might be dying, or something might horrible be happening to these other people. So your fear is not just, oh my God, something popped out at me in a dark room. You also have very emotional fear of, this amazing girl, she's like 8, 9 years old trying to protect her own life, might be getting killed, and I have no idea where she is, There's a lot more fear in terms of the narrative, and I love that.
Yeah, I like that as well, because it's not just giving you the same chemical reaction that you'd see, like, physically when you're playing the game. Again, increased heart rate, rush of adrenaline, possibly sweating when you're playing the game. It's doing that, but it's doing that for two different people, and I like the fact that it builds upon, like, it's not just a single layer. It's got, as we say before, good games have depth. It has depth to it, so it's not just a single layer of, I gotta worry about myself, but it's also, I gotta worry about somebody else, and that's one of the things that I like.
Yeah, I mean, Amnesia, you're not worried about somebody else, but you are unraveling the mystery of why you drank this potion to make you forget all your memories. Because, like, it literally starts off with going, Dear Daniel, you drank this potion because I didn't want us to remember. So it's literally, you're, like, kind of finding these little hints and clues of, like, what actually happened in this mansion that made you want to lose your sanity, or, like, lose your memory of all the craziness that happened as, like, you're developing through. So, like, it's also having a strong narrative to go with it, but not necessarily out of the sake of, oh, I feel bad for this little girl. It's, what the hell kind of crap did I get into that you would actually like corrupt your entire self just to try and forget, but then you actually have to try and remember in order to escape this place.
Well, I guess that also what kind of makes this matchup a little more interesting in that vein, where it's a more personal story, possibly for the person playing it in Amnesia's case. In Resident Evil 2, yes, you can play it as a couple of different characters, and again, you're trying to be more protective of not just yourself, but of other people. But sometimes people relate with the more of just, I'm trying to save my own ass. And I think that's, I don't know, I feel like that is an interesting point. I'm not sure if we can really dive right into that. But I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it in terms of looking at it from the lens of, I want a nice single game that doesn't have the distractions and just wants to be scared, or I want to have a deeper layer of, you know what I'm trying to say?
No, yeah, I get what you're saying. You know, like, do I even care about other people in the game versus do I just want to focus on my main person, right?
Yeah,
like,
stuff like that.
And I get what you're saying. I think the strong point of what Travis was saying about Amnesia is also to the environment. As you go through it, you find information about the environments. Resident Evil 2 is a lot in the same way in that as well, you know. You live in a world where there's zombies coming at you, and any average zombie game would just say, oh, someone got infected and there's zombies, right? Mm-hmm. Resident Evil 2 has a lot more detail to it. There's a whole backstory on Umbrella Corporation, who's supposed to be the savior, right? They're supposed to be the ones that are trying to help with this situation. Turns out they're the ones making bioweapons, right? And you start to learn a lot more about, well, wait a minute. Was Raccoon City falling like this? Was it an accident? Was it planned? You start to learn this is a zombie game where the zombies in it are not just like a random outbreak, right? There's actually a very detailed reason for it. I'm not going to go in depth with it because I don't want to spoil the game, but they were created for a very specific reason, right?
Yeah.
They're not zombies so much as they're parasites. They're viruses that infect people and transform them. So it's not a typical zombie story of, oh my gosh, now I just want to eat brains, right? There's a lot more depth into that. So there's a lot of world discovering that goes on in Resident Evil, and it extends far beyond just finding random notes, which I think is one of the things that I think Amnesia really lacks in, and I think Outlast lacks in this also, and I think that's why they kind of work in the same vein as far as their narrative goes, in that you just find random notes in these games that, you know, give you the information. Amnesia also has random flashbacks too, which I really like. So it has a little bit more than Outlast does in that vein, where you see like these little premonitions that are showing kind of what happened in this area. Right, Travis, from what I remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I really love what Resident Evil 2 does. It's not only that, but you find just random projections, right, where you'll see a code on the screen, or you'll see a picture on the screen that shows Albert Wesker, right? And it says nothing else, but you're like, wait a minute, why is Albert Wesker a part of this corporation? Why is he a part of this? And so it gives you just enough information to want to lead you to asking more. Like, well, wait a minute, if this is the case, does that tie back into what I saw earlier? And there's a lot of puzzle solving in the environments. You don't have to do any of that, right? You can completely ignore it because it doesn't matter. Like I said, part of the main plot for Claire's example is to save the little girl, right? But there's so much world building if you want to choose to explore it. And I think that's what I love about the game is, if you want depth, there's so much depth. It's as deep as the Grand Canyon, right? You can dive into the plot of this game. You can learn so much about each individual character in the game. Every enemy has a story. There's certain zombies in the game that are just random bosses you fight that have so much backstory to them. Travis recently fought a boss. For those of you, I don't know when this goes up related to the Resident Evil series, but there's a boss you fight early on in the game who just looks like a random zombie that falls over a cliff. In Claire's story, you find out this guy is actually vital to the plot of the game. This random nobody that you randomly fought at one point. That's how the game works. It introduces to you what seems to be random, but you can pinpoint everything is important. It reminds me a lot of Elder Scrolls, in that everything has a purpose. Nothing in Resident Evil 2 lacks a purpose. Every room, every enemy, every computer, every terminal, everything in that game was placed for a specific purpose, which is something that I really enjoy about the game. So that's my argument in terms of, you know, the narrative and why I think that game is so in-depth with it.
All right, do we have any final points before we do the voting then?
I feel like I kind of made mine. I don't know if someone else has some.
Travis, do you have any final points?
None that I think is going to save the situation.
All right, well, I'm gonna vote first. There's these animals that live in the wild. They're called trash pandas. The English translation of that is raccoons. Raccoon City means I vote for Resident Evil 2.
That was the most wonderful description that I've ever heard. In my entire
Okay,
life.
fine. I'll give a little bit of something, though. No, Resident Evil 2 has just way more depth. And again, as Mike was saying, again, you can dive into it. You can enjoy it at surface value. And this is one of the reasons why, again, I don't want to bring back in the Ocarina of Time Wind Waker debate. But one of the reasons why I was... well, I feel like me and Mike were both arguing the same points about the game is the fact that you can enjoy it at surface level, and you can enjoy it if you dive straight down into it. And so the fact that it could be good for people who just want to play a horror game and for the horror game aficionados, that's, I think, what's great about it. And I don't think that Amnesia's feeling of paranoia can really engage you to the extent that Resident Evil 2 can. But also, Trash Panda City is amazing.
I would love that name.
Oh, I would love that too. But I feel like it might take away some of the seriousness of it.
Yeah. You want to go, Travis?
Sure. Okay. So, even though I do always enjoy the I am defenseless type of horror over having any sort of, defense mechanism, I will also probably vote for Resident Evil 2 just because those sections of Amnesia where you have such little guidance in how to even solve some puzzles, it's just absurd. Whereas Resident Evil 2, I can run around, see that there's like a chain locking this doorway. So I'm like, oh, I have to go find some bolt cutters somewhere. And then I'll find bolt cutters and be like, okay, I remembered there was this weird gate. Where was that? I'll pull up a map, figure out kinda where it is, and then go. So like it's puzzles that are easy. I have an idea of what I'm gonna do. It doesn't take away. Whereas Amnesia, you can literally spend 2 hours doing absolutely nothing just because you're like, I don't know what to freaking do, and then you have to pull up a guide, and then I'm like, well, at this point, I'm not even scared. I'm just frustrated because I just wanted to advance. Whereas Resident Evil will constantly give you that. Like, it's really good, because we said this even about Outlast, is you're looking at the map and you're like, I have no idea where I'm going, but I feel like this is right, and then it usually leads to where you're supposed to be. So you feel lost, but at the same end, the map has such good map design that you know exactly what you're doing. Whereas Amnesia, it can be really tedious sometimes to figure out what you're or where you're supposed to go, and then it kind of takes away from that fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so this means Mike can vote for whatever game he wants. You can go Sonic Boom if you want, Mike.
That is true. So I
Sonic
guess
Unleashed.
then the Werehog was just the most innovative thing I've ever seen in video game history. No, seriously though, I gotta go Resident Evil 2. I think when I came into this bracket and when I saw the layout for it,
sorry,
there were two games. There were only two games that I felt in my head I could make an argument to potentially beat Resident Evil 2. The first game is the one that it's up against, Bloodborne. I could see an argument there. The other one was Silent Hill 2, which Resident Evil 2 almost had a face, but it got voted out due to Amnesia. So that argument kind of went out the window there. Resident Evil 2, I love games with lore, and I love it when there's more to a game than just boo, you know? I want there to be some reason to care still. I don't like horror games where there's just something that's going to pop out at you and it's going to scare you. I want something that gets to me emotionally, that gives me a reason to want to fight. Why do I want to persevere these jump scares, right? Resident Evil 2 did that. There was a reason I was running past the zombies. There was a reason I was trying to overcome these obstacles. And that was to try to save someone, right? Or to try to solve a mystery. It wasn't just, in the case of, for example, Outlast, I'm going to go past scares because I want to record an asylum, right? It doesn't really give a lot of motivation to keep moving forward.
No.
Resident Evil 2 gives you so much motivation, right? So much reason to try to continue to push forward. And I think that's why I have to vote for it in a matchup like this. The only games that I think have that drive more than Resident Evil 2 potentially would be Silent Hill 2 or Bloodborne. So, you know, that leads to an interesting finals matchup, at least in my head.
Agreed.
So, Resident Evil 2. With that being said, Resident Evil 2 with the clean sweep is going to join the finals alongside Bloodborne. We're going to have a very fun and interesting matchup coming up in the grand finale. Two very distinct games with very different ways of spreading horror. So I can't wait to see how that one ends up.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.